interesting conversation about new ways of approaching cosmology, and it's interesting that I saw that you had just behind you the universe picture, let's say. So I came across your project and I was truly interested. That's why I contacted you. If you don't mind, take a few minutes to just tell me a little bit, like a small intro maybe, or what do you do and everything, so we can kickstart the conversation.
Okay, certainly. Which project did you come across that?
Sonify.
Okay, sure.
So probably you have several, but that's the one I know.
Okay, no, that's perfect. Okay, so with Sonify, what we do is we have created a way to analyze the human voice and create a neurofeedback connection between the voice and the nervous system and state of consciousness and state of health. So by looking at the voice in very particular ways, you can understand how the music of the body is in proportion or out of proportion, and whatever is happening in the body is represented in some way as features within the voice, harmonics within the voice. So we look at those harmonics to understand the health and physiology that's going on in the body, and then we use the same understandings of harmonics to help the body rebalance itself. So by delivering specific types of frequencies and specific combinations of frequencies.
So does it go beyond the psychological into the physical? So physical abnormalities that can be also identified by our voice, practically?
Absolutely. The way that we look at the physical body is that we understand it first as a vibrational and frequency-based expression. And the physiology is secondary. So
it might sound naive, but I would love you to explain a little bit more about the connection of materiality and energy, because as I told you right now, I'm in Pakistan right now, and the terms and terminologies that are very commonly used in Europe and the US, they're still being discovered here. So I would love if we can really create the link between what somebody can feel and touch, and how do we say that this is just energy in the end.
Right. Okay. Well, I think one of the best explanations I can give is that what we experience as physical is an interaction of electromagnetics. So our physical bodies have been tuned to receive information on 5 levels, and those are the 5 senses. And so we're taking frequency information, we're taking vibrational information in the form of light that comes into our eyes, and in the form of sound that comes into our ears, and smell and taste and touch are all coming in through the nose, mouth, and skin. And all of those inputs to our system are actually different levels of a spectrum of energy. And even what we call physical, we know from current understandings of physics, this is not a quote unquote solid object necessarily. There's more space within this object of the table that's in front of me than there is solid matter. And what we experience as solid matter is simply that our hand and this table actually resonate in a specific spectrum of energetic expression that happens to correlate with each other, and so we can touch it. If you weren't sensitive with your hands to receive that information, or your hands didn't resonate in some way with this table, you wouldn't be able to touch it. You'd go right through it. And the same thing with with your eyes. If your eyes didn't resonate with the frequencies of light that are coming into them, you can't see them. So we have a very hard time seeing infrared light with our eyes, for instance, or ultraviolet light, or any other type of light that's outside of the visual spectrum. Like other animals can see a much broader range, for instance, of light, and so.
But different ranges of frequencies, like the ultra-red, for example, they do affect us. But for some reason, we have chosen, let's say, to not evolve our eyes in the way that they can perceive them. I will put it like that. Do you have any explanation about it? Like, what is your opinion about that? Why so?
Well, the way that our human body has been configured is largely based on use. And so over time, the way that we function and the limits to our consciousness, the limits to our senses are based on how we use them. And over millions of years, our bodies have evolved into their current conditions, what I call this is the human condition. It's the condition that we live within that is based upon how it's been used in the past, how our genetics have been used in our own family histories and in our cultural histories, and as a species, we have decided to prioritize these particular ranges of frequencies and expressions within our own abilities. Because that's what's been necessary to keep us alive, to survive, essentially.
But do you feel that we are evolving towards new types of sensitivities? Because I see more and more people being able to, for example, 10 years ago, not more than 10 years ago, if anybody in the West was talking about intuition, it was kind of a woo-woo, right? And it's only 10 years ago. And by now, it's absolutely normal. It's like a word that we use maybe even daily sometimes. And everybody understands what we're talking about. Everybody accepts it as a rule. So are we evolving into new types of receptive abilities, I will call it? Because nothing changed outside. We just understand more, right? We understand in a different direction.
Right, exactly. So I think that evolution is definitely happening. And that it's an interesting thing. The human experience goes through cycles. That's why a lot of times you'll see that, yes, we're evolving, but we're also remembering what we forgot hundreds of years ago, or thousands of years ago, or tens of thousands of years ago. And so there's a cycle of awareness that I think the human evolutionary process goes through, where we go into intense physicality and technology and also evolution in consciousness into higher understandings of physics and interconnectedness and unified field and all of those things. So what we talk about now when people are talking about intuition and connectedness on those levels are kind of nonlinear, non-local experiences with one another. Those are very old concepts. They are, they're written about in some of our oldest books and oldest traditions on the planet, both spiritual and religious. And so, I think that I think that we're evolving in those ways, and that we're also remembering that as we move into higher states of abilities within our consciousness, and we remember what's important, and we place value upon those experiences, and that connectedness, it grows.
How did you start getting involved into vibration? Vibration is a very, very interesting field. And the more we understand the connection between energy and vibration, this is practically one and the same. The more we understand the spectrum of vibration, how far it can go into affecting our physical bodies, affecting our psychological bodies, affecting all our bodies, as many as everybody of us accepts or wants to understand. And also, it seems that vibration goes further on it steps into the field of creation. It steps into the field that life cannot be created without vibration behind it. So tell me a little bit more about your journey with vibration, because it's an extremely interesting subject.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think for me, it began with learning martial arts and Qigong and Kung Fu, and learning breath and movement in particular ways that where my teacher taught to focus on the energy behind something as opposed to just the thing. And so we're much more effective when we focus on the frequencies and the energy that are cultivated behind our conscious expression, whether that's thought and emotion or movement. And so by working on the energetics of the system, of the energetics of the body, we become more productive, we become more effective, we become more powerful and capable as creators and as creators of this experience of, being in the human form. And that for me, that started as a child with those trainings that I was receiving. And then I started playing the piano as well. And I noticed the effect that frequencies had on consciousness, and the way that I would play, or the music that I would play, would affect people in different ways. And so I learned that by creating specific types of music, I could I could help people go into different states of consciousness, or go into dreams or visions, or deeper meditation. And so I began to work with that, and then I became a healing practitioner, and I started teaching Reiki and working with medical Qigong and frequencies that come through the body to heal other people. And working with those frequencies, I began to learn to move and manipulate energy in others that allows for greater healing and balance to take place. And so combining all of those things, and then using the voice and using sound healing and chanting and different types of vocalizations to balance my own body and to energize my own body, and then working with others in the same way to help them achieve the same sorts of results, using their own voice and using energies, breathing and vocalizations, toning, singing, and Qigong. And that all connected will, when it's done consciously, you're bringing energy into the body and harmonizing the body using sound. And so that's kind of a direct feedback loop that you can do yourself to create higher and higher degrees of coherence and energetics in the body.
As you're talking, I'm wondering, how do you feel difference between the different means of vibration transmission, meaning voice, instruments, mantras? There are different levels of information being put in the field. I feel that words, for example, have quite a lot of a difference between words, mantras, singing, instrument, and more subtle vibrations. I love your experience upon them.
Well, they're actually all the same. In fact, the way that we use language is entirely dependent on the level of consciousness that we hold. So whether you're chanting or toning or just speaking, using words consciously and developing the ability to deliver thoughts and understandings that are within you, not just with the words that you're using, but with the state of consciousness that you're holding while you're speaking, That's more important than the words that you use. And it determines the words that you use. It determines the language that comes through your being when you're conveying something. So to me, it's all the same. It's words are used consciously. They're an invocation. That's why we call it spelling. You use spelling to create a word, but it's also a spell, right? So you're casting your consciousness into this field using vibration. That's what language is.
It's a really interesting connection. I haven't done this connection, and I do have to say that I was observing that the different states that I am put upon according to who I'm talking to. And it's very interesting because it doesn't matter how far the person is. Talking to somebody in real time, even if it's through an electronic means, you can still understand from which place the words are coming through. So you putting it that from the spiritual understanding of vibration into a device, into method, into something that is matter and can translate what you perceive in something much more concrete and kind of categorized and broken down into specific delivery ways. How is this trajectory? So I'm going back to the Sonify, right? Or I would love to hear about your other projects if they are related somehow.
Yes, everything is related in some way, but specifically with Sonify, I think the easiest way to explain what it is that we're doing is we're looking at the energetic background within the human field and nervous system. And all of that energy, all of those frequencies, all of those vibrations are created by our being. They're created by our experience of life. They're created by our thoughts and emotions. They're also created by our environment and what we've taken in from our environment, both healthy things and non-healthy things. It's the physical body and its energy field is also constantly adjusting itself to the types of food we put in it, the type of water that we put in it, and all of the frequencies and molecules that are within all of those things. But if you think of a molecule as just a small piece of information that's resonating at a particular frequency, then the molecule of calcium and the molecule of magnesium and the molecule of iodine and potassium and all of these different things that we have called, we give them different names. They're really simply oscillating at different frequencies. And we know that because we can measure them. We can measure them using infrared spectrometry and lots of other methods, like radio astronomy does this when you look out into space. So there's really no difference between looking out into space using radio astronomy and looking into the body using a frequency-based assessment. It's just that the voice is actually taking what's inaudible in the nervous system and in our field, and the voice is creating an audible sound wave. That's its job. But as we speak, those frequencies that we use to create words are coming from and being amplified. And they're coming from the physical body. They're coming from this generator of energy, which is the physical body and the field, the biofield. And so it's really, the voice is a transducer. It's a transformer, it's a step-down transformer of energy. So we're taking something that we can't hear, that's very subtle vibrations, and we're giving it physical sound vibration. And that's what we're doing. We're listening to this amplifier of a person's entire being. And that's what the voice is. So when you look at those frequencies, the person is really like a song, and their organs and all of their physiological makeup, their hormones and their nutrients and their thoughts and their feelings and everything else are a part of creating that kind of symphony that the body is expressing in the moment. And so analyzing the voice in a particular way, you can see what parts of the symphony are in balance and in perfect resonance and what parts aren't. And then what we do is we feed back to the body the frequencies that it requires in order to achieve balance again. And the way that we do that is we've created very specific types of headphones that are that create very warm and rich analog sound, and they also create a field. They create an electromagnetic field around the body, and they also send the energy into the ears using lasers. So you have something called photobiomodulation, which is laser coherent light going directly into the brain, coupled with music and sound waves.
So just one question, it's a tiny detail for what you're saying. Why analog sound? Why not digital sound?
Well, the body's an analog system, and digital sound is ones and zeros. It's very precise, but it's not natural sound. And so it's a representation that we're trying to create. When we create technology, we're trying to create something as close to a smooth sine wave as we can. But digital sound is always a poor representation of a smooth sine wave. And so when we're listening to music or anything else in headphones that's digital, if it's low quality especially, you can actually hear the digitization. You can hear the, these digital artifacts and these things that are non-resonant in the music. And that's actually damaging to our brains. It's damaging to our nervous system. It's damaging to our ears. So you end up with ringing in your ears. You end up with, feelings of agitation in your body. And the music ultimately just doesn't sound very good. When you get into higher and higher quality music and the sampling rate is higher of that music, what it means is that the little steps of ones and zeros to make the sine wave get smaller and smaller and smaller. So you start to notice them less and less. And in the very highest realms of, musical production, you have incredibly rich, warm, soothing types of sounds that can be generated because the brain is no longer hearing all of those individual steps that the computers are making in order to reproduce pure sound. So that's what we do, is we have found specific ways to create pure sound. So even if it's coming from a digital source, it can find its own resonance within these headphones. And by the time it comes to your ear, it has created all of the natural harmonics that should be there in the sound that you're listening to. So
that's extremely interesting, and mostly because very lately we started a project to unite meditators and music and create this, we call it medituning. So just like get tuned through sound while you're meditating. So kind of like two channels of tuning, because I felt that meditation is also a channel. So it would be very interesting if we can experience that in one of the future sessions. That's one. And the second that really, really attracted my attention was I was looking at Sonify, is the extrapolation to the plants. And how, because somehow from the human, you do have a direct feedback of how they're getting affected from the sounds. From the plant, it's a different type of feedback loop. So I would like to hear more of how you work with plants and sound.
Sure. So plants are extremely sensitive to sound and to energy fields, just like people are. And you're right, you don't have that feedback system because, most people don't have the ability to, ask the plant if it likes the music or not and get an answer. but
Exactly.
but but you can in lots of ways. There are ways of measuring the vitality of a plant. You can also use different types of computer vision or simply, video to record what the plants are doing and how the plants are acting. Plants are very responsive. They simply respond in ways that we aren't used to looking. So because we're used to a very quick feedback loop with people, with plants, they just move a lot more slowly and they speak a lot more softly. And so you have to have more sensitive instruments, whether it's your own mind and consciousness and system, or whether it's you're using microphones and you're using special cameras to see the energy that plants are giving off, and the color, the density of chlorophyll, the amount of yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you can also see the vitality of a plant by connecting electrodes to the plant, and you can read the energy that's coming from a plant that way. And so you can see very quickly whether they like the music that you're playing.
It's interesting because it just reminds me what the change of the color of the chlorophyll. It reminds me that one effect that you mostly see in people with blue eyes, just because their eyes are easier to observe, and you see that depending on their mood, they have completely different color of eyes. So a blue-eyed person you cannot see him 2 times with the same blue. And probably it's the same for all color of eyes, but just more difficult to observe in the darker eyes, I guess. So it's kind of the same way of interacting. And how similar or how different is a person and a plant into their response to sound? So do we need the same sound? Do we need different sounds? Or how our
that's a great
states are
question.
getting translated?
Yeah. So if you imagine that the entire universal construct that we live within is operating under one law of harmonics, that harmonic law is based upon all of the natural harmonics that exist within the system. And everything follows that pattern. Everything follows those laws. And so those have become the laws of musical theory. They've become the laws of physics, the laws of proportion, all of the mathematics behind not just the physical construct of reality, but biology itself. And not just the physical biology, but also the physiology, which is literally the movement of energy through a system. So it's the evolutionary path. So if you can look at not only the structure as following this certain pattern, but also the evolution or the movement of energy through the pattern actually creates what we see all around us as nature. And so what we're actually seeing is humans and plants and animals and an entire system that is growing and evolving and moving toward a certain goal. And that goal is, once again, harmonic balance. So even though we have a dynamic system, we're following a certain law. And that law is really based on the golden mean. It's based on Fibonacci, or the golden spiral. And that's one of the primary geometries that we see in everything. We see it in everything from, the 5 platonic solids to, molecular formation, to how plants grow in spiral fashions, to seeds and flowers and fruits, and how they all follow these certain laws of mathematics based on 3, 5, and 8, and the spirals that you see in a pine cone or in any piece of fruit. You also see those same spirals in currents of energy in the ocean and in space and in the galaxy itself.
And I'm completely unaware of that. I haven't researched at all, but do we observe the Fibonacci law applying in music and in sound, like in audible sound?
Yes, yes, it's quite remarkable. The proportions of the golden mean are incredibly important in sound, because what that ratio does is it creates it's what we call nature's perfect damping. So if you're creating lots of energy and lots of interference patterns, there will be a dampening down of specific energetic releases at certain nodes or ratios of energetic interference patterns. And that damping down of energy means that we don't have chaos. It means that in certain places there is a reduction of force, a reduction of outward expression, where it becomes inward. And at that point, you have an opportunity for energy to kind of balance out the entire system. So at these perfectly spaced ratios within the spectrum, you end up having these nodes. And the nodes are what we see in plants as branches, as flowers, as leaves. And so that's how it applies to music, and that's how it translates into the physical world. It's like it creates the negative space that allows for nature to grow.
How does it get represented into the human body? So like these harmonic structures, you can totally see them in a tree. You can see, from looking at the tree, you can see the balance, you can see the harmony according to its state, or the imbalance in cases there is because of the environment. How do we observe them in people, in humans, in us?
Well, if you look at yourself, you will see that the nose and the chin and the top of the head are a perfect example. So the tip of my nose isn't right in the middle of my face. It's just below the middle of my face. And so the ratio is 1.618. And that ratio is seen everywhere in the body. And in fact, it's seen everywhere you look. It's seen in absolutely everything that is naturally created. And it is something that is actually attributed to what humans find beautiful. The more beautiful something is, generally, the more we see this golden ratio within it. And vice versa.
Facts, yeah.
But if you see it in your finger, the joints in the finger, you see it, there's 1.618 is like the distance between the tip of my finger and my elbow and my shoulder. It's never right in the middle. It's always just offset from middle. Also, the belly button in the middle of the body is not right in the middle. It's 0.618. So if you go all the way down to the genetics, there is a 3-to-5 ratio in the shape of the genetic code. And literally in the ways that the molecules combine, it's a ratio of 3-to-5, which is 1.6. So you find it on every level.
So do you feel that sound vibration created from us can actually go and influence down into the molecular level?
Oh, absolutely. We're doing it all the time. It's the, just because we don't necessarily pay attention to it doesn't mean it's not happening. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is, I think, is very interesting because there has been a question in my mind: why all nations, all religions, everybody on the planet, they do have some kind of music, some form of music. There's practically nobody on this planet that has never heard about music in their lives. And it's one of the few things that, except from Coca-Cola, that everybody has heard about on this planet by now. The interesting part would be, how close do you think we are in understanding how to use the vibration to actually intentionally create changes in our molecular system? Because we do it without knowing that we're doing it, but how close we are in doing it intentionally?
So different populations have been doing it intentionally forever. It, like I said, it's part of the spiritual practice of people all over the planet. So one example is Judaism. Judaism is, you know, there's a huge amount of recitation and chanting and speaking sacred words that, and that's used in also Buddhism. You're doing specific types of intonations and chanting and using sacred words for your meditations. And, you know, if you have ever listened to Buddhist monks chanting, they have a very particular way of chanting, overtone chanting, that brings in a huge range of frequencies and harmonics and subharmonics that are, some are extremely low and some are extremely high. You know the overtone chanting I'm referring to?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I recall that they have done a study quite recently that actually the different temples of the Buddhists, they create a vessel for different frequencies to be applied.
Exactly. Yes.
Life for like birth, death, and rebirth. So they, it's very interesting. Please go on.
So, right, architecturally as well, the spaces that we create resonate with certain frequencies and certain scales. And when you tune those spaces to the frequencies that you're going to be using for the purposes that you want to achieve, whether that's health or raising consciousness or bringing in information of some kind, creating harmonics within the community, all of that is that's all extremely important, and it's built into a lot of our spiritual understandings. It simply isn't necessarily applied in the mainstream educational system, and so it's not applied to things like modern architecture or you know, how we do things in the world. But if you look at our history, you'll see that it's everywhere. You know, the back in the time of you know, Aristotle and Plato and you know, people like Pythagoras, you didn't just learn one type of information. You know, you didn't just learn astronomy. You didn't learn just how to be a musician. You didn't learn just chemistry. You learned all of them. You learned astronomy and chemistry and mathematics and music and all of these things because they all follow the same laws. And when you know how the universe is functioning and how nature is functioning based on those laws, then you can build those laws into your society. You can build it into your architecture. You can build it into your music so that people are listening to music which is harmonically balanced and will bring them into greater harmonic balance. You can create architecture, which is what they did back, you know, thousands of years ago, and even just a few hundred years ago. They were building architectural structures that were much more harmonic. I mean, if you look at the architecture of ancient Greece, for instance, you know, all of that is based on, you know, the golden mean. It's everywhere. Yeah. It's in Renaissance painters. You know, the more beautiful the art, the more you would see the golden mean within it. You know, like the Mona Lisa. And if you go back even further and you look at the ancient temples and you look at the ancient pyramids all over the planet, all of these things are embodiments of these ratios of harmonic perfection.
That reminds me of a very interesting research that they have done in Pollock's paintings, that what we knew about Pollock is that he was just painting without rules. That was the belief behind Pollock's paintings. But they did a very interesting research about how much is going into the fractals, his way of painting. And they realized that it's highly fractal. And fractal practically is what you are explaining. It's the Fibonacci frequency in matter, let's say. And it is very interesting because we see that people, when they get into these altered states that an artist gets to create anyhow, they do connect automatically without knowing to these universal laws. So what is exactly what we're tapping in, and what are we missing when we get back into our normal consciousness, let's say, levels?
Well, what we're tapping into, I think, is we're tapping into the greater energy field, which is the background and the source for all of life and all of creation. And when we do that consciously, we begin to see all of those patterns that are then manifesting in physical forms. And those patterns follow fractal holographic laws and patterns that are, it's, if you desire to create an unlimited expression of yourself, the way to do that is to not have any laws at all, but to simply resonate every possible frequency combination that you can and allow the interference patterns to generate their own expressions and their own manifestations. And that's essentially what the universe has done. It has created a space in which all of these frequency and harmonic dynamics can express themselves in different ways. And if we approach life, and if we approach our investigation into the universe from a place of being separate from it, then it's very challenging to it takes a long time to see what's really going on from the bigger picture, because we have to look at everything as an independent system. And our education system does that. It has us looking at everything as independent systems, but it's not like that. And if we close our eyes and we use meditation, and if we use music and other methods to enter into a higher state where you are truly merging with and becoming unified with this universal expression, we have no choice but to see the reality, which is these fractals, and which is this harmonic structure behind everything that we consider physical. It's all one system. It has to be. There's no way to isolate or to create independence, true independence, within this universal system. That's something that we like to fool ourselves and have that illusion within our own minds, but that's simply the human condition and the duality that most people are living within. So going into those higher states of awareness and having that experience of the universal harmonic, and then bringing that awareness back into the human mind and into the human body and into the human expression in the world, is how we transform the world. It's how we begin to recreate the world in the image of the divine, in the image of the universal. And that ends up creating a world that is more beautiful for us. It also creates a world that is more healthy. It also creates a world that is more harmonic, that is actually more resilient and resistant to decay. And so these are all of the ways that we can employ those understandings, because it creates a world in balance. And if you start to apply those same rules to things like the economy, and to the architecture, and to the technology itself, even your technology will begin to support life in ways that our current technology does not. Because
how
our
would
current...
you see? How would you see? Because that's a very, very interesting subject, that even our technologies has to start become more mindful, let's say. With the structure of our technology right now, it's unhuman. And I think that we realize it in this specific period of time that everybody's using maybe even more technology than before because of the circumstances. You really feel the effects of the current state of technology. But technology is evolving as we do, so it cannot go other way. But how would you say technology start adapting into becoming more natural, I would say? Because for me, that's all like laws of nature that in the end we are talking about.
Well, I think that we have no choice but to start to see the detrimental effects of technology and to acknowledge those. And also to see the power of technology and electromagnetic fields and, electricity and all of that. Electricity and magnetism and information transfer that's happening in technology, when the same understanding is given to the human body and to the health of biological systems, you start to look at the effects that are going on, and then you can't really refute them. I mean, the more we investigate how to create health and well-being, and the more we look at the true and real effects of radiation and electromagnetic fields, it's more and more apparent that obviously this is an electromagnetic system. All of biology is an electromagnetic system. And so of course we're going to be influenced by the fields that we find ourselves within. And so it's really a matter of, transforming technology in such a way that we're not fighting with ourselves. It's pretty ridiculous that we spend billions of dollars a year creating technologies that are killing us. And then we spend another, billions and trillions of dollars a year creating technologies that are supposed to heal us, in the medical system. I mean, how ridiculous is that? We don't make any sense, I mean, we should be creating technology that not only transfers energy and transfers information, but also is healing. I mean, why don't we do that? It's kind of obvious. And if you do that and you employ these awarenesses in your technological work and in your architectural work and in your agricultural work, it's all the same. It all should be toward one common goal, which is resonance, which is health and well-being, which is, embodied in all of these different ways. And then we create a world which not only follows natural laws, but applies them in everywhere you look. And so the world itself, society itself, becomes a fractal expression of nature, but with a human hand. So does that make sense? So if we created society to be a holographic expression of natural laws, everything that we did would support one another. The food that we grew would support our health and well-being. You wouldn't need a hospital. The motors that we created and the, things like these cell phones that we use would emit frequencies that would be musical to our cells. Exactly. That would put our human body into a state of bliss and, energetic perfection. It's ridiculous that we don't think that way, but we live in a capitalist society. We grew up and we have grown and developed from, infancy as a culture into what we consider now, the world around us, which is certainly not yet aware enough to be considered fully adult. We're kind of in this adolescence of, playing around with technology and seeing what will happen. But we're also, as a culture, we're driven by these capitalistic, self-indulgent, independent, greedy sorts of memes that you see everywhere in the world, and those sorts of egotistical, independent thinking of, you know, I need more for myself or for my company or for my country. These are all of the levels of identity and limitations of consciousness that we are suffering from, because it makes people think that they're independent, and it gives people these feelings of power, but ultimately to our own detriment as a culture, as a race, and as a planet. I mean, we're killing ourselves and we're destroying the planet as we do it, because we're not paying attention to these rules, these laws, these understandings.
Because also it cannot be one or the other, right? Like by the time you kill the planet, you're automatically killing yourself. There is no difference. There is no
exactly
that planet and this body. There's no such thing. I really truly love the idea about creating technology that actually heal us. And I'm curious if there are initiatives in this direction and how we could support them, because that's exactly the point. For me, it's always, we are used to believe that it's either or. Either we have money or we are healthy. Like we can just cannot have both. Like we have always this division. It's like one or the other. And I tend to believe that actually it's never that. It's like all together in a uniform way, but probably applying a different law than what we think. So it's always like a third option that actually combines the two and expands them beyond. So are you aware of technologies that are moving in this direction, or about research centers that are moving in the direction of creating blissful technology, let's say?
Absolutely, yes, there are many. You know, one of the initial influences in my life was Viktor Schauberger, and he created, you know, very simple technologies that were based on the vortex movement or implosion, and creating spirals, and that, because he understood the way nature works, and he started to employ those same understandings in his technologies, he was able to do things in incredibly efficient ways. And so he was, you know, kind of an initial inspiration of mine. There are many technologies out there that are using these concepts, but you're right, they tend to be underfunded. They tend to be slow to come out into society and social awareness, and a lot of that is because, you know, our system is set up to support these large industrial technological companies, and it's because it's based in capitalism, and because of the nature of our business structures and what we value as a race. We're putting value on the wrong things, aren't we? You know, we're putting value on the speed with which something can get done instead of the quality of that thing.
Or the results.
Or the result, exactly. Yeah, we're putting value on the amount of money that it takes to make it. And so we'll make it very, very cheaply with the cheapest possible components, and we'll configure it in the most inefficient way. You know, but if it's the cheapest to make that way, that's what we'll do, so that we can cut all of these corners and make more profits. That, unfortunately, these are short-sighted goals, and you know, that's not the way that a very evolved mind would think. You know, a very evolved mind would think, wow, if I can create something, and I want to have, you know, of course, what I want to create, I want to have a positive influence on my world and on my progeny, and on my, you know, future children and all of the future children of this planet. Then, I mean, why do we?
From the cheapest material, right?
Right, you're not going to make it from the cheapest material, and you're not going to just throw it all together and get it out there and make as much money as you can. You're going to think of the way that we should be thinking is that we should be we should be thinking not only of this moment, we should be thinking of every moment. If you think of the universe as a holographic expression, we exist in every moment simultaneously. So if we are going to create something, doesn't it behoove us to create something with the awareness that we're influencing everything in every moment?
And that's exactly taking me back into a thought that I was having. I keep observing this new trend about observing the moment, being in the moment, you know, right? And it's interestingly enough, I was realizing that the important is actually that this present moment is defining all past and future moments. So this one is what you're saying is this moment, but it includes all of the future and all of the past. It's not that we are just care about what's happening right now, because we have minimized it down to just care what is happening right now. Right. And I don't believe that this is what we should care for.
Exactly. That's one of the laws of the Navajo and the Hopi, you know, in the Native American tradition, is that everything that you do influences and it has a direct effect on the next 7 generations of our people and the next 7 generations of our planet. And that's just, you know, looking at the effect of, you know, for instance, a wave that you send out into the future, you know, eventually it's going to dampen down and your influence will get less and less. And, you know, that's a good thing if you're not going to create from a very, you know, holistic or balanced place. Because, you know, if you think about it, we are our own worst enemies unless we decide to upgrade our own thinking and begin to put that awareness into practice, into what we create. And so, yes, I think that the evolution of consciousness and the evolution of technology go hand in hand. And the more we begin to investigate the true power of technology, the more we start to realize that technology itself, as it starts to mimic these higher orders of coherence and starts to mimic the higher kind of holofractal pattern of the universe, it starts to behave differently. It starts to behave in ways that are unexplainable by modern science, but are only understood in our spiritual practices and our religious understandings. And so you're seeing a confluence of spirituality and technology, so that at a certain point, we're not going to be able to differentiate between physics and metaphysics, and science and medicine and, you know, technology is all coming to a place of harmonic resonance where they're indivisible.
Exactly. What I find fascinating is how many words is modern spirituality using from the technology world. So we talk about downloads, and I cannot find a better word for downloads rather than downloads. And it's funny enough because it feels that we needed to create the technology to find the words to describe what we knew before with different words. And I really find fascinating this circle that we are doing.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I agree with you. You remember back when we had cassette tapes to listen to music? So that is a very linear kind of information transfer. You couldn't just skip to the end of the tape to listen to the song at the end. You had to listen to all of it, or you had to fast forward and wait for the song to, you know, for your tape to get there. That's like the mind. It's linear, and it thinks in one step after another, the human mind. That used to represent, you know, cassette tapes used to be an amazing technology. You could record sound on this thing. So, but then they came out with what? CDs. And so with CDs, you have a spinning disc and you can access anything on that disc at once. You know, you don't have to fast forward the disc. You just change where you're reading from. But it's much more interesting kind of concept of a spinning disc with all this information on it. But it's no longer
go from a line to a surface, right?
To a circle, exactly. So you're no longer in a linear kind of sense. Now we've gotten rid of the disk altogether, and we just have a chip, and you can access all of the information at once. And you also have the internet, where you can access all of the information that is available to all of the computers everywhere at once, because now we're living in a field of information. And it's the same thing with the mind. If you look at how the mind is working and how we, when we are not in linear thought and we are connecting to higher orders of our own consciousness, we are actually able to, as you say, download information or connect to an information field, which is nonlinear, which means you don't have to receive the information like you would read a book, one word after the next. You receive the information as a packet. It's a whole packet of information. We call it a download, but the reality is it's an absorption. It's an implosion of information into our awareness. It's a merging of this body of energy and information into our body of energy and information. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it's just there and it's complete.
And many people have been asking, like, how do I know if I have a download? And that I find that a very, very funny question, because it's one of the things that the interesting part about separating download from inspiration or insight, because for me, there are 3 different ways of receiving information. And all of them are very interesting, and they're for different parts of an evolution of a project or of an idea. But the download is the interesting thing is that you don't understand it, you just know it. By the time it comes, it's there. So you don't have to analyze it as a thought, or you don't have to put it further to allow it to evolve, because it's already quite a lot of it's a package, it's an already done system. You just have to go and make it reality after, but you don't need to start thinking upon it.
It's a knowing, exactly. So that comes from learning to trust. When you begin to trust yourself and your connection with the universe, when you can trust your own mind to be connected to and implicitly a part of this greater system, then you begin to have these knowings which are nonlinear. They aren't explained or explainable by your rational mental thinking process. It simply is what it is. And as you trust that knowing or that inner awareness, it grows. It's just like exercising a muscle. The more you do that, and the less attention you give to the doubting, questioning, rational human mind, which is, independent and based on egoic thinking and logic, the more we begin to trust the greater processes that are not necessarily foreseeable by the linear human mind, which can only go so far in its ability to think and to create hypothetical options of how something might work. But the more we trust that we're part of a universal mind, and that the universal mind is not out to get us, it's not out to kill us, it actually supports life, then we begin to connect to a much greater source of information than a book or the limited human mind could ever hope to convey,
Absolutely. And I really love a phrase that I was reading somewhere, that the universe just gives you the first step. It doesn't give you all the steps. And you have to get there to open up the second step. So we kind of have to use the trust to be able to unlock the next steps, let's say, if we see it as a game, which practically kind of is. So I wouldn't like to use all your time. We're like more than an hour already, and I find extremely inspiring the way that you approach vibration into a much more broader field than just technology or than just systems. And I would love if we can find ways to actually explore that during this project that we are starting, because this project is practically, it's aimed to be a global tuning through a weekly session and probably through consequential global ceremonies. And by ceremonies, I put everything inside, from ancient tribes to modern technology. I don't believe that one is different than the other. And I would love to see if we can actually, in one of the future sessions, if you have time, and if, I don't know how Sonify works. I don't know if you have predefined sounds, or if somebody's emitting the sound, or how does it work, like technically. But I would like to invite you, if you have time and will, to be part of one of our future sessions and create together with us, as we are meditating it, a more tuned result to everybody who's on board for that.
Oh, absolutely. I would be honored. I'd love to do that. And I think that, you know, working with meditation and breathing, certain breathing patterns and postural awareness, and then adding into that holographic awareness of sound and creating a soundscape and a field of energy for the consciousness to move into, especially in a group, in a large group. And the larger the group, the more, the greater the potential of this harmonic balance and what can come from it. So I'd be very honored to do that.
Thank you so much. I will write you more details in the chat, because this last Thursday we had the honor to have a healer opening the portal for us, and for beautiful reasons, this Thursday actually there's a lot of groups that are, without knowing, we are synchronizing at the same time. So everybody will be meditating, completely different groups, but with this common respect that we all have the same goal of personal tuning, let's say. So I would love to invite you in that, and I'll write you more details so we can get down to how this can happen and what's the format and all that, just details. But thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and I would love to take these conversations further on if we find time the next days, because I feel that the more we even concretize or co-dream about different ways of creating reality, the more they will actually become reality.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. And I'd be happy to continue the conversation and talk about different ways to apply these understandings and how we can transform this planet for the better. I think it's a perfect time for that. And that's what crisis offers you, you know, the opportunity to grow. So here we
Absolutely. are. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day, because now your day is starting. Here the day is kind of finishing, and we will be in touch for the rest soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.